All right. Looks like we are live. Let me just hop into the studio real quick. Make sure that... Let's set the visibility to public so people can actually bloody see it. All right. Put monetization on. Let's get to it. All right, guys, we got an interesting show for you today. This is kind of like a test show before we start going live every single day. Yeah, I think this is going to be really, really great. All right. So Russell Brand has officially been charged, unfortunately. This is always something that is very, very sad, very, very tough. I started to like Russell Brand a lot, and it's always disheartening to see this. Now, really, we have two options when it comes to these. Either they're innocent, or maybe attack them and use them to silence them. Which one of these do you think is what's actually going on here? But I want to propose that there's actually... But before we get to that, we're going to check out his response and do a little bit more of a comparison. And so, yeah, basically raping and sexual assault charges. Again, very unfortunate, but let's take a minute to see what he has to set up my sound the right way so you guys won't be able to hear it. Let me fix that right now. Let's do this.
Hello. Firstly, thank you for these incredible and overwhelming messages of support. We're very fortunate in the British government. We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon to be used against nations that will not accept and tolerate levels of corruption that are unprecedented. I'm speaking particularly to those of you that are watching this in the UK. Okay. How do you feel about some of the high-profile cases that are not being pursued and prosecuted? How do you feel that the Southport murders were handled? How do you feel about the context? Me, I've always told you guys that when I was young and single, before I had my wife and family, who were just out of shot over there, my beautiful children, before I lived in the light of the Lord, I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in looking in my eyes. I want to thank all of you for your continuing support. I want to let you know that our show will be on Rumble on Monday. Thanks for your support there. Charges in court, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. In the meantime, you lot, stay free, and we will be continuing to discuss this matter.
First off, I wanted to talk about he said a couple of things there. I couldn't help but notice that immediately he started to be used and weaponized against us, and I do believe that that is true. There are two options here. One is there's basically two things that are being as a weapon against people, such as Russell Brand. Andrew Tate is another name that comes to mind. We're going to talk about him in a second. Or is it possible that he's a third worse option that I don't want to be true, but it is a worse option than both of these things together? And so he talks about how he's grateful for the chance to have the opportunity to defend himself in court, and we should all be grateful that we do have some form of a mob justice and hangings and lynchings and rubbish like that. But along the line of and to sort of like take them down, one of the things that I've noticed is that Andrew Tate seems to be like a different case the same way, because Andrew Tate actually has there's a lot of stuff of him kind of just like self-snitching, right? And I know what a lot of you guys are going to say is that, oh, he back then. How do I not know he's just joking now when there's a fire under his feet, right? Or like, which one was the lie? Was he lying back then, or is he lying now? And a lot of times it's our own bias that'll just pick for it. But I wanted to show you a couple of clips and just sort of see, like, does Russell Brand have anything like this? Because from what I understand, Russell Brand has never self-snitched in this matter. And so
you've got a fit sister.
We can go through this here.
He's gonna obey me. That's what I want.
You know, you said it looks like, but to me, I find that quite flattering, to be honest.
That's sketchy.
You know, like, that's exactly what you'd expect. Like.
I'm fucking all these 15-year-old.
You know who one of the guys was? That was Candace Owens' husband.
Yeah.
Her husband's really good friends with this dude. So she's talking about he's such a good man. Yo, if they weren't buddy or part of the same fucking scam, these people would never associate 15, 14-year-old, 16. They don't care.
And that is true. Like, Andrew Tate is the opposite of a conservative in terms of lifestyle. He might have some political with real, family values, or at least he didn't live them out in the past. Maybe he's changed. Depends on which video you're. Andrew Tate is that there is actually a lot of videos of him just sort of ratting on himself. And I know, like we said before, they're saying, oh, it's a joke. Like a lot of times it doesn't sound like a joke. And how do you know he was lying then versus is he lying now? And so I'd be curious to hear your guys. I'm not some idiot, liberal, woke twat that wants these guys to be guilty. What? No. I would never want to women. I prefer that no women were harmed whatsoever and everybody is innocent. That's the best outcome. And so I'm not one of these idiot fake feminists. Women actually got harmed in order to prove a point and just be like, yeah, I'm justified in hating this guy. That's nonsense. Are you stupid? Like, come on. At all. But I'm more skeptical of Andrew Tate than I am Russell Brand, simply because Andrew Tate is on footage. He's self-snitching. Whether or not it was a joke, it doesn't sound like a joke to me, but maybe it was. And again, all of this stuff, but that's kind of my take on the Russell Brand thing. And the other thing is, does Russell Brand get a pass because he's a Christian? I got my Bible, but are forgiven in Christ. I believe that Christ covers all, and that if he's a self-professed Christian loving God, then I accept him as a. However, that does not excuse us from repercussions in this life for our actions. And so if we did do something in court in this life, Christ covers all, our sins are forgiven, and we're justified before God. But in this life, we still got to have our day into what we did. Now, and so, no, I'm not giving him a pass just because he's a Christian now. I don't think that's accountability for their actions. God is not a crutch for you to get away with doing stuff. You can't do something heinous and then quickly turn to God and hope that justifies you before the throne and room of God in the end. But in this life, part of being sanctified is a call and saying that we're sorry. And so, obviously, we're not going to assume that he's guilty or not. He'll have his day in court, and that's one of the really court system completely rigged against these guys now. Like, do we even believe that he's going to have a fair trial anymore? In my mind, I'm actually questioning is whether or not I even want to go there, because some of the things that are happening there just doesn't look like a great place to travel to right now. But in terms of the worst outcome, there is a way in which this is worse. We have these broken law systems that are manipulate us, so that's one option. But there's another, and then the other option is maybe this guy that we all look up to and love, maybe he actually. Which one do you believe? There's a third option. You don't have to pick between one of those two. The third option is that, hear me out. What if the world that we live in is so corrupt and so broken that there is a matrix? Let's up the ante a bit. What if there is a matrix and the justice system is being weaponized against dissenters? Lies also are not perfect and do heinous things. What if that's the world? What if that's the world that we actually live in? How do we figure that out? How do we live our lives with that in mind? The system's broken and the people that I look up to are broken. Honestly, personally, I've come to a place where I just don't trust, the podcasters and my heroes in this life, the people that I look up to. I also don't trust the system. I only have one actually not flawed and actually saved me and guarantees me hope in the end. Doesn't guarantee these sort of things. It's like, hey, the system is broken. Legal systems can be weaponized against us to hurt us. Guys, Tate or anyone else who gets these sort of accusations against them, maybe they did it. Maybe they didn't. I hope that they didn't. I never want to be one of those idiots. We can, feel justified in hating somebody. That's nonsense. But in the end, my hope is not in any person, God. But with that being said, speaking of corrupt systems with the whole trans rights thing. Now, I want to be very, very clear. I love trans people, and I don't wish them any harm, and I want them to live long, happy, fruitful lives. However, the idea is problematic for me, and this is just another example of that. A female fencer apparently gets kicked out for protesting having to fight a trans good idea. Men are just inherently stronger. They are. Is like
a women's fencing match is getting global attention after a female fencer was given the ultimate punish. Fencer Stephanie Turner was scheduled to face Redmond Sullivan at the University of Maryland. And this video you're looking at, posted on social media, shows that just as the match was about to begin, Turner forfeited the match in protest. Now, because of that, Turner received a black card. That is the harshest penalty you can get in the sport, and she was more than 1 million views. Turner told Fox News Digital, quote, "I looked at the ref and I said, I'm sorry, I cannot do this. I am a woman. This is a man. I cannot fence this individual."
Wow.
Dr. Sapphire, she said that she wouldn't sign up for events when she saw this biological male was on the her. And she said, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give it to God. If this person shows up to my event and is on my script, I would take a knee, and that would be God's will.
Out a statement on their trans policy, and in their statement, it essentially said the reason they were including trans athletes is to expand access. But the reality is men to compete in fencing as well as women. The reality is these men can't cut it with the other male athletes, so therefore they are coming into the female sports.
It can seem like a cheap shot is like, but it's also possible, right? Like just because a possibility or reality goes against your absolutely are men who can't cut it in men's sports, and so they switch to female sports. You're actually just limiting controversial to say they're not real women, but they're not. And you know, I love everybody and trans people to, you know, live good lives and love themselves and have good lives. I have no ill will towards anyone. It doesn't lie. I can't say that I love somebody by telling a lie. If my belief is that gender is about that, I'm not loving anybody by lying in order to be popular and to make myself feel like a righteous person. And so things with compassion. And you know, from what I understand of, you know, gender dysphoria, it's an awful, awful feeling. I wouldn't wish it. Struggling with feeling like in the wrong body, like that's terrible. And that sucks. And I always want to be in a position to show love and empathy for those that, you know, particular mental affliction. But at the same time, how can we help people if we're forced to lie like we can? And so I think good job for this girl. It's important
There's
that they
well-meaning
do this because
inclusion that has just morphed into dogma as compassion. The reality is there are biological unfairness when you have a biological male competing in women's sports. When it comes to their strength, their bone density, completely unfair to female athletes and has taken us back decades and decades of progressive.
Yeah, and it's actually female erasure. If we're getting vocabulary from the left, it's women's erasure. You're erasing the female experience when you allow males to come in, compete, and absolutely dominate. You're erasing a female's ability to compete and win in their sport that they're doing. This is female erasure that's happening here, and it's nonsense. All right, and I just wanted to show this to you guys. Okay, we have a female bodybuilder farmers. Okay, the 16-year-olds aren't even fully developed yet. They're not even fully grown yet. Watch what happens. Who do you think's gonna win? Male athletes that are jacked? Or the freaking kid who's just a male? It's the male that's gonna win. Every time. It's just not fair. Didn't crush that. But like it's just not fair. And that's actually okay to help each other overcome our differences. The fundamental fact is that we are different, and we're different for good reasons. Coming into problems, you start creating problems that don't need to exist, and you actually start hurting the other side. And so I'm all for women's rights. I can't support trans women in women's sports, all right? I love trans people, and I wish them all of the best, and do fake compassion in order to be popular with people. It's like, no, we need to tell the truth. Otherwise,
trying to get fairness for women athletes.
It's true. And what I found interesting, Emily, is that this was a lifelong Democrat. This woman was. And she said that I voted red down the ticket this year. It was like waking up to the lies of the mainstream media. And she's not alone. There was a 25-year-old who told the New York Times, I was radicalized because...
Yeah, and we've talked about that, right? That was a single issue for many voters who, yes, realized they had been indoctrinated by the mainstream media when the reality was so clear. It's holding a sword. My mom fenced growing up. She's amazing. She actually got her master's degree from there at the University of Maryland. And I think about, as you describe the biological differences, it includes on the distance of arms and then at the other end of a sword. That's a big deal. But even bigger.
And another thing is that that's also why even within gendered fighting sports, right? Because you don't want to have a 5'5" dude and a 6'5" guy. The bigger for you to get in and grapple with when he has a much longer arm reach. And, they say, oh, you have to affirm their identity, but the truth is, you have to affirm the truth. And, that's not a world that functions well, right? And so, nobody gets to just say something. Good for you if you feel that way and you want to be represented that way. Look, it's fine. Go do your thing, but don't expect the intent and its understanding of what reality is just to make you feel better. At the end of the day, the truth that makes us all equal is that my mental health is my problem. I don't get to go out into the world and start yelling at everybody to change their language and feel better. That's my problem. That's what I have to do. Right? And so if you're a trans person, look, I love you. I want to be yourself. I'm not trying to stop anybody from transitioning or doing their thing. But when it comes to negatively affecting female erasure, that's when I have a problem. And the problem is, there are some things in life that we just don't get to do. And that's just it, right? Problem that says that you're in the wrong body and you got to switch over. Well, sorry, base all of female sports and commit female erasure, on a global scale in all of sports just for your mental health problems. That's just not how any of this works. And so I feel like real compassion actually takes courage, because real love doesn't lie. I'm not gonna lie to a trans person and be like, oh yeah, everything's fine, you can't. I love you. I want you to have a good life. I want you to feel better. I want you to love yourself and be who you are. Heck, I'm willing to be friends, but there are certain things. So those are my thoughts on that. If you agree, maybe like and subscribe. We're going to be live streaming every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And yeah, I think that's going to be just about it for today's stream. And so super awesome.